Let's talk actions in Bildr. Actions are the steps of logic that everything runs through in your application. When you want a button to do something, you're going to have a flow of actions that actually are the commands for those things that you want to happen. There are a lot of different things that actions do inside of your project, and it's important to know at a high level how you're going to go about finding and solving for certain problems by figuring out which action type you need for that particular use case. To show you a couple examples, let's create a new flow and browse some of the actions that we can add to it. As you may guess, Bildr has a lot of different actions in it, and we always continue to add more to them. Just this past month, we've added a ton of AI actions, for example, that let you integrate with APIs from somewhere like OpenAI. Now, it's important to know that there are some high-level buckets of what actions do. The first is conditional logic. Some of the most important things that you're going to do are going to be based off of logic where you filter actions to split them into an appropriate next step. So if-then logics and then if-then multiple value logic checks are two actions that you're going to use very frequently. In an if-then action, you're basically going to look at one value, compare it in some way, shape, or form with one of these specific checks to a second value. And if that's true, you're going to run a certain flow. And if it's not true, you're going to run a different flow. So in addition to an individual if-then fork in your logic, where you'll send one value one way and any other value another way, you also have multiple if-then statements that you can make in one. One example was, what color hair do you have? Well, we know there's only one response. It's what color hair do you have? But there actually could be many different answers. It could be red, it could be brown, it could be blonde, it could be black. And so what we actually would want to do in a circumstance like this is take the test value, which might be from an element or a variable on the page. They said, hey, here's my hair color. And so if the value they selected matches brown or matches black or matches red, we're going to go ahead and run this flow associated with that value. And in this flow in particular, if none of the values match, which might be the case, sometimes you might make sure it's not the case ever, but you have another flow that you can run. If there are no values that match, what should we go do next? Now, one thing that you're going to see as you build more and more is that your flows will work together systematically. They don't sit in isolation. What they actually typically do will be a reference for each step along the way. So in addition to open-ended logic checks like this that let you proceed along any sort of custom logic that you want, Bildr also has some additional logic checks built in, like validate URL or validate an email address, so that you can proceed if a value is an actual email address. And so conditional logic is the first real bucket of actions in Bildr. The next big bucket that you have with actions is data management, or frequently you hear CRUD Operations, which stands for create, read, update, and delete. Basically is how web apps work, all revolving around managing data and doing one of those four actions. We have a variety of actions that make this really easy for you. We have a create record option that lets you choose what data collection you want a specific record to be created for. So let's say tasks, and then map certain values to that field, maybe from an input from your user, or maybe just a default value that you always want to populate there. In the same way that you have create records, you've got update record actions available, as well as a whole host of others. Now, these default actions update and read data from Bildr's data collections. But if you wanted to integrate with data from anywhere on the web, you can run API calls and integrate data from literally any source that exists online. So if you already have a set of users, if you already have data from somewhere else that you want to integrate, you're able to do that directly here with a custom API call that lets you get any sort of data that you want and use it inside of your application as its main source of data. So in addition to logic, in addition to getting and interacting with data, there's going to be a whole host of other types of things that you're going to do inside of Bildr. You're going to run searches on the content on your page if you wanted to have a search field, for example. Maybe you needed to set a value into an element, like, hey, they saved their name. I want to update the profile at the top of the page with their name because they just updated it. so you can update it on the page directly. Or maybe it's styling differences. So you need to add a style class to something on your page, or you need to remove a style class from something. I'll show you one example of that here in just a second. And some of the final actions that you're going to be using inside of Bildr might be opening a URL to navigate page to page, or even sign up a user and log them in. Let's dive into a really common example that we see, and that's updating menu bars to look like, hey, this is the menu that I got actively selected, so that I know visually as the end user what page I'm on in particular. So I've pulled up our app here, and I've got our app home here. I'm going to go ahead and open this over here, and what you can see is next to to-dos, you'll see this little diamond arrow, and it's a little bit of a highlight showing that I have my to-dos page active. Now let's say I click over to profile. I can see that profile is now active and to-dos no longer is. So this is using a series of flows and actions to update visually the menu items as well as put the content into the page that we're looking at. And if we go over here and zoom in, what we can see when I click on to do, I can see this little icon right here means that there is an event attached to this particular element. So I can see over here on my right-hand side with a click event, I'm going to open my to-dos. So let's go ahead and open that. The first event here is open page into container. So what this is actually doing is opening my tasks page into this middle container, giving me that single application feel. But then it's also doing two nested flows on top of that. It has a deselect all menu items and then a select menu item. And so let's click into deselect all menu items. And what we can see is two actions that remove menu item selected from the two different menu options in the menu. First, we want to remove all the selections. And then if we go back to that flow, right after we remove it, because we selected to-dos, we're going to add this selected menu style class back to the to-do list. A couple of things that you're seeing here as we do this is using flows to create reusability and nesting them against each other so that you're able to refer to them when you actually need them. To show you how easy it is to then take this and take it to the next level, let's zoom in here. Let's say I want to add another menu option. I'm not going to create the page associated with it, but I do want to duplicate it so we can see it'll pop up right over here. Let's just call this our new page. By default, it doesn't have my event assigned to it. And so what I would really like to do is mimic this open profile. So to do that, I'm going to go to open profile. I'm actually just going to duplicate this flow. So instantly my open profile copy shows up. I'm going to have open new page. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and call this the task list that we're going to open up. So it'll open up the same as this to-do list. But what I need to do now is set the styling changes that are going to come with this. So under the deselect all menus flow, this is the flow that all of these different flows are referencing. I'm going to duplicate one of these actions. Go ahead and rename this new page. I'm already removing the correct style class, but I need to switch which div, which menu item it's applying to. So I've taken care of that. And then as I know, as I go to open new page, I need to next mimic the select menu item for the new page. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this group. Open select menu. And I'm going to duplicate it over here again. So we've got select menu item, new page. And this is adding it, so I know I've already selected the correct class, but I need to switch it to the new page. And then the second to last step is going over to my new flow, nesting in my select menu item, new page, putting a weight right here. A weight's important. A lot of times it might not feel like it matters, and it doesn't in really small scale, but it's a really good practice to start using it, because one important thing I want to happen here is I actually want the removal of all of these items to happen first before I then add this follow-up. And so by putting a weight, what I'm saying is don't run this action until this one right here completes. This is not typically going to be something that you feel performance differences in your app. The user and yourself aren't normally going to notice this difference. It's simply a sequence. Literally, we're talking about milliseconds of differences, and just making sure the right things happen at the right time to deliver the experience that you want. The final thing that we have is that when we go over to new page here, I need to make sure I trigger the correct action on this click. So I selected the div, I'm going to do a click, and I'm going to do open new page. And so now we've set up everything. We've added a whole menu item. If I had a whole different page, it would load in. We selected the to-dos page. And so what I'm going to do is jump back over to our preview here. We already see our live previews updated. I can see my new pages right here. And if I click that, it's going to load, as we mentioned, my to-do list. And it is going to remove the selected menu class from these menus and add it to this one. And because I added it to that global flow that was used to remove all the style classes from all of the menus first, I even automatically am removing it when I'm clicking the other menu options. So that's an overview of the different types of actions that exist in Bildr, a really simple example of replicating flows, nesting flows, and how they can work together, and an introduction to some of the things that you're going to be using most frequently to build the really custom applications and experiences that you want inside of Bildr.